we're going live. Testing. Oh. You guys ready? No. They just have the starting screen, but the audience is getting antsy, and they want to hear from you. All right, everybody, welcome to Gravel Trap Live.
We're here. Everybody. I am sad about my small closet and the fact that Squeaks and I have to share a bathroom. He needs his own bathroom. Okay, that's the moral of this story. I want a room for him to have his toilet in because right now it's in my walk-in closet.
Wait, I'm sorry. For the listeners that don't know, Christina has a cat named Squeaks.
Oh yeah.
Right. I didn't realize that cats. I've never had a cat, and I know cats have litter boxes, but cats use the use your bathroom. I took my dog out to go to the bathroom, so I'm like, what is this concept that you share the bathroom with your cat?
It's more so that I've seen other people have the setup of they have their pet's litter box inside of a designated space, right? So some people have like a closet, some people have a second bathroom, so they toss the cat's litter box in there, and I like that idea. I like the idea of Squeaks having his own just more space that is his, whether that be a walk-in closet or another bathroom. I would love for his toilet not to be in my closet.
For the record, honestly, some people do train their cats to use the bathroom or use a toilet.
Which is I've thought about it so many times with our dog. I was like, if I could just train him to use the toilet, man, the world would be my oyster. Everything would be just fine.
I just want Jasmine to pee in the shower so she doesn't have to go outside.
Jasmine, by the way, people, is not Buck's girlfriend. It is his dog.
Oh my gosh. I just watched the Big Bang Theory episode where they're doing the quotes and be like, is this Cinnamon, the tiny little Yorkie dog, or his girlfriend? And it's stuff like, I can't believe we're both Geminis, or whatever it is. And like all of these quotes where you're just like, that is so questionable. But at the same time, I get it because I've had people assume that Squeaks is either a man in my life or my child, just depending on how I phrase things.
What a nickname for a boyfriend, Squeaks.
But see, I won't say Squeaks. One time I was being like, oh yeah, I'm getting ready. We are getting ready to move.
Oh, okay. Well,
just like ambiguous statements like that.
I get that.
Or like, oh, I have to go pick up, I call him the boy like a lot, or just like the child or my baby boy. So I get it.
Cute.
There are some statements where I'm like, yeah, great. I have to have this conversation where I'm like, no, it's not a human I'm talking about.
Amazing. Well, let's talk about some humans, shall we? Specifically some humans that raced in Singapore this weekend.
Oh my god.
What an exciting race. You guys. I feel like I've just been smiling all day. Like my dimples need a break because I've been so happy all day long.
I'm not
happy when Max wins because they yay for Red Bull, but come on.
But it was just a good race. Like, even if you like Max, getting to see him race against other people, actually do overtakes and go wheel to wheel is so much more satisfying than just like, bye.
That's true.
Like, come on, given the choice, I want to see him fight people. Not not literally fight, but like car fight, you know.
Not that I would ever think that Max would physically fight anyone. He's literally like the nicest, sweetest person in the world. But
I've seen him and Checo go have slap fights with a tortilla, so you know,
amazing.
he's got some good swings in him.
He did get pretty aggro with George that one time in Baku.
Oh, and with Esteban.
Was that him?
Yeah, George gave the whole
No,
gave
I
him.
don't know why I thought it was Esteban. What am I thinking?
No, there are two incidents. There's the one with Esteban from back in the day when
Yes.
he was in the pink OG, and then there was also the Princess George incident from this year, where it got a little spicy.
Yes, well,
But you know,
it was more so words being shared at Princess George to this year. I felt like than fists. However,
that's true.
we all know that F1 drivers can have a history of being physical. My favorite is the one, and I don't remember who the drivers were, but I'll have to look it up after this, where they crashed and they both DNF'd on the side of the road, and one climbed out and started running towards the other
Yes!
one's car, and the other climbs down, and he like thinks it's about to be this like amicable, like, I'm sorry, man, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you, and he starts running. The things they can't do today. But okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk
Okay.
a little bit about Singapore. First, let's start with qualifying because Liam Lawson
Oh my gosh.
is the new king of qualifying. Even though he didn't put it on pole, he is the new king of qualifying. The scream I scrimped when he pushed
Bumped.
Max out of Q3. I think I probably woke up the ghosts in my neighbor's home. Like that's how
Oh my
loud I
gosh.
screamed.
That's
It was crazy.
amazing.
Question, real quick.
Yeah.
Caroline, can you turn up your audio in any way?
Can I?
Do you have? If you don't have that control, Christina, can you turn yours down?
I have no control over what this thing does. I can just move it further from me though.
Let's see. I don't think on my end I can control levels,
Okay.
but I think you can.
I can't, not like this.
Oh.
So
I'll just get really close.
yeah, you get closer. Christina gets further
this
away, and it should be better.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Oh my. Oh no. Oh no. This thing has gotten loose and now it wiggles more than I would like it to. I blame Squeaks and his big butt.
Sorry, Caroline, you were saying?
No, that's okay. We were talking about Liam and qualifying. I gave my screams. Christina.
It was a lot to process, and also for added context, Q1 was happening for me at 6 a.m. I think.
Oh, that's a good point. It was early for you.
Normally at 6 a.m., the only thing I have the capacity to do is my morning stretches and half-assingly like throwing toys for the aforementioned cat that is getting a lot of attention today. But it was very, very like that Q1 was really intense. Especially because it just kept going and going and going. No, wait, they got out in Q2. Sorry, I'm jumping back already.
Yeah, they did get out in Q2.
They got out in Q2. And that wasn't just the two Red Bulls. It was literally Liam Lawson and then a current Red Bull driver, a past Red Bull driver, another Red Bull driver, another past Red Bull driver, and Yuki Tsunoda, which, the tears I shed for Yuki. Like that was my big emotional takeaway. I was too busy being sad about Yuki to be happy for Liam in that moment. Like, Yuki has been having such a bad time lately. And it makes me very, very sad because he's one of my favorites. I love watching him drive and his little, like, just joy on his face when he gets happy. But then, yeah. He didn't even get to he didn't set a time. Like,
that's right.
Like,
that's
he
right.
didn't get to set
because
a
he got
time at all
impeded
in
on
Q2.
his first lap. That's right.
Mm-hmm. And he got called into the weighbridge. I'm sorry, but I think it's outrageous that they can be called to the weighbridge in
During
anything other
qualifying.
than like Q1. I get it. It's 18 minutes. You have a decent amount of time that even with traffic, even with like, you can manage that a lot better. But Q2 and Q3? No. Can you not? Like,
Do you mind?
Do you mind?
Well, and it took a while for Q2 to start because of Lance's crash.
Yeah.
So I was like, you couldn't have chosen that to be the weighbridge moment when we were all in suspension anyway.
There are better times for things. I want to know the logic behind that of doing like weighbridging in the middle of an active session. I don't like it.
I do have to say though, I did feel like the FIA marshals, officials, and so on and so forth that were there were speedy with their decisions this weekend.
Yes.
Speedier than the past.
Yes, decisions were good, but it took them 3 minutes to get the to get the Aston Martin safety car to Lance.
That's true.
Like 3 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad he was okay. I'm glad he was conscious at the point of impact, because I think that was everyone's concern, was that like he wasn't conscious, but he did seem to be conscious.
Yeah.
At the point of impact.
Well,
and
he was able to get himself out of the car and everything.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it was relatively fine, as most of the crashes these days are. Thank you, safety features and
Thank
big
you.
brain engineering.
Yes.
Oh, what
As
else
we learned in the
happened?
Monza episode, safety
yeah.
is so important. No, but speaking of like crashes and debris, I think the longest cringe I felt the whole weekend was when Logan bashed into the wall and then we just watched his front wing drag for like the whole rest of the lap. I was like, like I know he's doing the right thing. I know he's supposed to like bring it home so that he can stay in the race, blah, blah, blah. But I was like watching the debris like flying off and the sparks and they get wedged underneath there. I was like, oh no, the destruction, the endless destruction that's just being spread. It was so painful.
It's those kind of situations where I'm kind of like, this feels like the right situation to throw like a black and white flag and to just be like, no, you have to pull over here.
Interesting.
You're bringing too much onto the track. Like maybe not this situation, because this one did only leave like a handful of pieces of debris, but there are some situations where they're dragging so much of their car and have so little control where you're like, I feel like we have a good procedure for this. But yeah, I want Logan to be doing better. I want him to just have a no incident weekend where we don't have to talk about him at this point, quite frankly, because I feel so bad for him because he was brought up earlier than his program was planned. He was supposed to have another year in F2, and instead he has to publicly have all of these like incidents happen on a much bigger stage where it's much less appropriate for him to be having these learning moments.
Yeah, in a car that's still in development too, because like it's not like he's being thrown into a car that's been developed and is performing really well. Don't get me wrong, the Williams is performing better than anybody thought it would perform this year, but Alex has had experience in the Williams, as it's been being developed, and so I will happily defend Logan, but yeah. Anyway, there's plenty to talk about. I feel like Carlos starting on pole, I think we were all nervous, but seeing some of the Red Bull performance over the course of the weekend, I don't know that we were necessarily nervous for. I don't know. Did you think that Max was going to come back and win?
No. My bet was that here were my predictions on my last live right before the race. It was, and this would have been Saturday night. I didn't post qualifying one, but my bet was that either Carlos or Lando would win, and then second and third would be either Lando or George. So I was real close to that one.
You were close.
One corner away from having a perfect score. But then I was also intentionally asked multiple times where I thought Max would end, and that prediction was 4th or 5th.
Okay.
Knocked it out of the park.
You did great. Also, to anybody who's watching, feel free to shoot us some questions because we will definitely answer them.
Yes.
But thank you, Buck.
They can't see what you guys are typing, so I'll relay the questions.
Yes, we can't see your questions, but we're relying on amazing producer admin Buck, who, if you're asking any questions on our Instagram page, you're also talking to Buck. So this is good practice. You ask questions on our Instagram page. But no, I feel like I've just been trained this season to not doubt Max. And I'm like, as soon as you start to doubt him, he wins. So I'm like, all right, I won't doubt him. I'm going to hold on to the possibility that he could come back and win this, even with all of the reliability issues that they've experienced all weekend. And it worked for me. Reverse psychology on myself. And he didn't podium. No, but I feel like in shock and awe at the end of the race at how brilliant Carlos was.
Like such a big brain moment.
I was like, where did he learn that? You know, like you think to yourself, like, where does one learn that or even think? Because I said to my husband a million times, I was like, that feels like the biggest gamble to me. Like, that just feels like the riskiest, craziest gamble. And he was like, no, it's genius. It's brilliant. It's literally like higher IQ thinking. And I'm still in shock and in awe. And I said, here's the part about it that I feel like is so impressive that people don't realize. They couldn't talk about it with each other. They couldn't, like, it wasn't like Carlos could be like, all right, telling the team to tell Lando to tell the plan of to the stay within DRS plan. They just like the power of friendship, telepathy, like spoke
See?
to one another. I'm serious.
Why make teams based on friendships is a legit strategy.
It's crazy. And I said to my husband, I was like, I don't think anybody else on the grid could have pulled that off. Like,
No.
I don't think anybody else that are not teammates could have pulled that off successfully. Like, I was just so in awe of all of it. It was so amazing. So amazing.
Yeah.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys have some thoughts on forgiven infringements / impeding incidents this weekend?
Are we speaking of Max?
Well, I mean, we had
Max and Checo, I would say.
Checo's complaining about Hamilton going off and gaining an advantage. I have an opinion about his start and the fact that he had to give 2 spots back when I don't think he needed to give Lando a spot back in the beginning.
Oh, no, I think he had to give Lando the spot back. 100%. 100%.
Well, let's go. We'll go frame by frame, and we'll do a separate YouTube video on why doesn't make any sense. Anyway, but your guys' thoughts on the general, like the forgiven infringements, impeding, and does it set a new standard for relaxed stance on such things by the stewards?
It was bad. It was really inconsistent over what would be counted as impeding and what wouldn't, and what would get a penalty and what wouldn't. It's not a great look, especially if it's very, very blatant of like this car is smack dab in the middle of the track on a like warm up or cool down. Like that is the one place you're never supposed to really have your car. It's always supposed to be off the racing line and like with enough buffer kind of a thing. There are very few circumstances where it's acceptable to do that. So on that front, it's like, yeah, no, they need to have a meeting. And important thing to remember is that there are different stewards each and every race weekend, which is like, it helps make sure that there isn't a consistent bias that's happening, but it also opens you up to inconsistencies if they're not all given the same clear guidelines. So it is a known problem that the FIA do need to address. I think they need to have much better guidelines and examples of what they're going to count as impeding, what isn't they're going to let fly. Like it just, and them hiding behind the whole excuse of it being lap 1, turn 1 flies for a lot of stuff. But there are some mistakes that just like, I'm sorry, even if it's lap 1, turn 1 and there's a lot of chaos, you should know better. You should be able to handle that kind of a situation. Like
Yeah,
I'm specifically talking about Checo hitting Yuki in that instance. That was a straight up ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think that sometimes, especially post quali or post race, when they've kind of stalled a decision for afterwards, I think they're kind of waiting to see how much that decision would impact the results, and
which
that
is stupid.
weighs. And I said I have no proof of this. This is just a theory, but
yeah,
I think that they kind of see how much that decision would weigh in, and if it would drastically change things, then I think that they decide to like let bygones be bygones and let things fall where they may. I also think, again, another theory, but I think that based on the fact that a lot of the charges or whatever were dropped after qualifying because some of the impeding was done by a Red Bull to an AlphaTauri, and the AlphaTauri representatives never went to the defense hearing, which was a little bit convenient, I think, for Red Bull. When you have situations where you have sister teams like this, I think that sometimes they'll decide, oh, we're just going to deal with it ourselves and do what's going to be more advantageous to, let's say, the team that's still in the race. So
yeah.
I think that that's one of the dirty truths. But again, it's a theory. I have no proof. But I do think that that could be a reality. But good question. Good question. Because we didn't really hit on that because it was one of those, well, I felt like the Yuki, when Yuki was impeded in Q1, I was like, that needs to be answered for. That's ridiculous. But then they were like, 19 of the drivers are being investigated for impeding. I was like, all right, this is a little ridiculous.
And I know that it's a road course, like it's a street course, sorry.
Yeah.
And the layout of it does make it particular when it comes to impeding. Like as you go around those corners, you have to continuously be changing the positioning of your car. And that is a challenge. But, Fernando Alonso suggesting that it should go to a 1-point shootout is a bit ridiculous to me. But having Q1 be split on certain tracks into 2 groups makes sense to me.
Almost like, too much sense.
Just give them that little bit of buffer space every once in a while. Like, especially at smaller, shorter tracks like Monaco or what is it, Hungary, that's like the second shortest on the calendar. You have places like that where it just makes sense. Or street tracks where, again, you can have accidents happen really quickly and then cars could potentially drive into each other. Like, a lot of this makes sense in my mind.
It really does. It just makes so much sense. But that was a really good question. I think that a lot of times things just kind of get brushed aside by the events that are actually happening. Because the other thing was like Bottas DNF'd and we like never saw that happen. I was
notice.
like, why didn't we see Bottas DNF? And at one point, I think that the Mercs were chasing the obviously Carlos and Carlando, they were chasing Carlando. And then the camera cuts to Max. And I'm like, why are we watching Max? He's not leading. The one time.
We have a question from Instagram.
Hey.
I'm going to give this
Instagram
name a shot.
Corporate?
Yes. The CEO is a big fan.
Oh.
No. I'm going to pronounce this name, and I really apologize if I butcher it. Aofe? Aoife. You know Aoife?
Aiofe?
Yes.
Is it
Aoife? Say it again.
Aoife
Stone. Thank you so much for reaching out. Your question is, what are your thoughts of Daniel coming back with Lawson doing such a great job so far? Do you think this could potentially change the seats for next year?
Man, I don't think Red Bull know what they're doing with the seats. How the heck I don't think they have a clear picture. You want me to have a clear picture? Like, I feel like that team is giving me whiplash, okay? All I want is to know that Yuki is okay and safe and that he has a seat. Like I'm never going to worry about Daniel. Okay, Daniel is one of Christian's favorite children. I'm going to say that until I'm blue in the face. I'm going to say that until I take the time to draw the theoretical Christmas card with Daniel, Verstappen, and Vettel all on Santa's lap, okay? It would be adorable. It would be hilarious. My drawing skills are crud, though. So, it'd be really funny. But still, like, Red Bull will take care of Daniel. I'm not worried about him long term. But, like, Yuki, they kind of forget about Yuki, I think, because he really is there because of the Honda partnership. And with the Honda partnership coming to a tail end, I feel like they're just kind of like, right, we have Yuki, and we kind of have to. So, yeah. Like, from what I've heard, they're planning on announcing Yuki at Japan because it's his home race. That makes sense. They're planning on announcing Daniel for 2024 afterward once he's back in the car. So, okay, cool. I think that they're also potentially just evaluating Checo still because, I'm sorry, we've heard one too many comments of them being like, we'll see. And even Checo has changed his tune a little bit to being like, I'm evaluating options for after this contract is done. Which is like, okay, those are fair things to say. But we had a real big switch up from the summer break where they were like, oh yeah, we're happy with Checo, to now being like, yeah, we're evaluating things. And you're like, okay. And Red Bull do have that history of seat swapping mid-season or when their drivers even have contracts. Like, it is a known thing they do. It's their style. It is what it is. Anything's possible. I have no clear answer here. I'm so tired of them. I need them to just make a decision.
I'm done.
Please.
No one tells us anything. Aoife, I hope I said your name right, by the way.
You did.
I know. Okay, good. Because I know it's one of those old Irish or Scottish names. And
I'm going Irish.
Yes. And I know it's It's one of those ones that's not really spelled how Americans say it, but I'm so proud of myself for knowing that one. But okay. Yes, I think that nobody tells us anything from these teams, so we can't speak with authority. However, based on Liam Lawson's post-race interview, I think he's really hungry to have a seat, and I think
Oh
that
yeah.
he knows he does not have the history to win the popularity contest because he hasn't been around long enough, and no one's going to beat Daniel in a popularity contest, and Yuki's been there for a hot minute. So I think that because like afterwards, I feel like on the interview afterwards, they were trying to be so sweet and nice and congratulatory of him, and he was like, "I got to work on my starts. I got to work on getting better at this. I got to," and I was like, you know what? Respect, like respect for you trying to prove to them that you really, really want to be there, and like you're gonna continue working to be there. So I think Liam Lawson deserves to be there.
Mhm.
It is a harsh reality that for someone new to come in, someone has to leave, and I don't want to see Daniel leave. I don't want to see Yuki leave. I don't want to see Checo leave. Obviously, we're not going to be seeing Max leave, but I think that I'm like, if only there was another spot. If only. So
Let's get 2 more cars on the grid.
tell me about it.
Switching gears just a little bit. Did you guys notice? And we have more questions, and I'll get to them. But did you guys notice the start of the race? It sounded really hectic for the commentators. Like they couldn't keep up with everything that was going on. Like it was almost like the first time they had commentated a race together. I felt like for the first, and maybe the listeners,
For Crofty and for
yeah, like they kept playing catch up and couldn't figure like it. It didn't sound bad. It just sounded like there was more going on than we could see. Like they must have been getting information from off screen or something like that. But for the first 5 laps, it felt like they couldn't keep up with like it. They kept having to go back and, we're gonna have to wait and see that. Or it just felt really much more hectic start of a race than I've heard before.
I think a lot of times they're at the mercy of whatever the cameras are showing them, and so they'll see something they want to talk about, and then by the time they finish their previous sentence to talk about it, they've changed the shot. So they're like, I was going to talk about that, but now we're going to talk about this. So I don't know. I mean, again, it was also early in the morning when I was watching, so I'll be totally honest with you. I don't really listen to them as much. I don't like tune into them as much at the very beginning because I'm trying to watch and keep track of everything that's going on. And I'm like, wake up, Caroline, watch the cars. But also,
we were up at 5.
There was a lot. I know.
I had ice cream for breakfast. That's how I woke up.
Up is a very generous term for what I was.
Oh, well. Stirring is closer to it.
Like I had squeaks in one arm and holding the tablet in the other hand, just being like, yes, everything's fine. But okay, I will say, I think that the color grading was slightly different for this race weekend. So looking, because the aerial view that we got for the race start was also, I think, a little bit farther out than we typically are. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was just slightly disorienting of what car am I actually looking at, especially when you have the McLarens and the Mercedes right next to each other this weekend when they're both dominated by black. Like there were moments, especially with the exposure on whatever cameras was like,
because it's nighttime.
I was myself kind of confused by I was disoriented a little bit with a couple of the shots of who I was watching, just because of that one specific camera angle right at the start.
Yeah, there were times where the Alpines kind of looked like Red Bulls from above, and I was like, wait.
Yeah, like there were some of those moments where just the camera exposure was a little bit funky. And also, I don't know who of which broadcasting team travels to the race and which ones of them might be working out of the home box back in the UK. So that also just messes with your internal clock and makes things funky. Like even if they are live in Singapore, this is a race where they try to stay on their local time zones, but still it's a funky existence to do that.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I know that Singapore is like notoriously the hardest one for them to kind of transition into. Australia is also a hard one, but like they usually have a break around it, but they like kind of didn't really have much of a break this time. But I actually felt like some of this tomfoolery started to happen when later in the race, when the Mercs were like, when they pitted to start catching up, because that was when I felt like Crofty and Martin were like, put your money on Mercedes. Mercedes is going to win this race, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, they are confident. They are very confident on what I would have called a gamble.
Was it a good gamble? Yes. Did I at any point think the Mercedes were going to win? No, I didn't.
I got nervous.
If you look at the math,
I won't lie, I got nervous.
I think if you were to use multi-viewer, and I don't know if any of our viewers use multi-viewer, but you should, the data that he puts into that allows you to see exactly what they probably saw, which is mathematically, if they do this per lap and get there in time,
they'll catch him.
They'll get him. And Lando was also dropping back at the time and falling out of DRS, so he would have been easy pickings. Hence the brilliant. And by the way, Carlando's nice, but the gravel trap is officially coined for Claren.
Oh yeah, for Ferrari.
So this is the new team.
Yeah, I saw you do that.
No,
oh yes, it is.
I hate that so much, Buck.
Christina.
Sorry.
You can hate it all you want, but it's super popular.
It's real.
It's real.
It's
Team for Claren.
For Claren. Well, I will say I was nervous. I saw them gaining a second and a half, 2 seconds a lap. And I was like, we have 15 laps left. They are definitely going to catch him. But I think overtaking Charles obviously takes more time in a lap than if they were just rolling out in clean air. And then they would have caught him if Carlos hadn't done his absolute mastermind plan. But they didn't count on the racing dynasty that is Carlos Sainz Jr. I was so proud. I was just so excited. I was so like, oh. Plus, for those that don't know, my husband's Italian. And so, like, as you can imagine, it was a stressful moment in our house as the Mercedes were hunting down. Because the other thing is, I don't really have, like, a team or a driver that I'm like, yeah, you're my favorite. Because, like, I would love to see the Mercedes do well. I would love to see Lando win. I would love to see Carlos win. Like, obviously, that was what made it so exciting, was that it was going to be a big deal
no
matter who won in the top four. Like, it was going to be a big deal if Carlos won, a big deal if Lando won, a big deal if George won, and a big deal if Lewis won. So, I don't know. I think that was awesome. Okay, let's hit some of these questions. Sorry, guys.
It's really good.
John Walshaw would like to know, did you guys watch the F1 Kids?
No.
I saw the
version?
highlights. I love the F1 Kids thing. Was it Harry Benjamin again this year? Or this time that did it? Because he does a great job. But no, I love the F1 Kids broadcast. I can't access the F1 Kids broadcast with my subscription. I wish I could. And I think it's so cool and it's so cute. And I love their little emoji things.
I like their emojis, but the emojis
avatars.
Don't help me.
Avatars. Sorry.
The little avatars, emojis, whatever they are, they don't help me actually identify who each driver is. Like, that's the thing. I feel like the whole purpose of being able to see their faces is that you actually know what their face is, which you don't get with the emojis. Like, either show me them with their helmet or like show me them with their actual face. But like, I like the style. I like how cutesy it is. I don't feel it's actually useful. Even as a child, that would have annoyed me.
It's very informative. They put really good stats in there.
I like their graphics.
Yeah, the avatars are hard to like keep track of, but they have the names there and like their little race suits on, so like you can kind of tell. But I actually feel like they do a good job of making the information digestible. Hot take, new fans should watch the F1 Kids broadcast for the first few races to kind of get their feet under them, because it feels sometimes like drinking from a fire hydrant when you're watching and there's these, amazing veteran professional announcers and racers that are doing the announcing. And you're like, what does that mean? I don't know what that is. And I'm like Googling everything my first couple times watching. If you watch the F1 Kids broadcasts, they'll explain it all for you. And they'll tell you the other thing I felt like was kind of funny. I watched the F1 Kids broadcast recap of them announcing the lineup, and they roasted some of them in the
they did. Leclerc, who hasn't won a race yet.
Yes, when they got
I saw that
starting in second is the guy who hasn't won a race yet. I was like, the savagery from these kids.
Like kids who haven't had a filter forced on them yet is so good. Quite frankly,
like,
if I could talk like those kids do and not get in trouble, I would.
So funny. Like it's not that easy to win a race. It's hard. Anyways.
I mean, Max Verstappen did it how many times? How hard can it actually be?
When you have a fast car, it sure is easier.
Maybe the others should just fix their effing cars.
Anyways.
Chris Lewis would like to know, do you think a team like Alpine should be putting more focus on their reliability rather than the current car development? I feel like the DNFs are really adding up.
You're really
obviously.
This is for Christina. This is the Christina question.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm an Alpine fan. No questions asked. I really like seeing teams develop and get better. But Alpine, it's frustrating me because they've known their reliability has been a problem for years. It has been years. Why are they letting this problem fester and grow? It's ridiculous. You know it's a problem. How have you not fixed it yet? Also, the guy who's interim in charge of their team is the guy who was previously in charge of that flippin' power unit. Like, I'm sorry. What? That guy? Really?
He is the interim. I mean, they haven't hired him full time. I think I like to be optimistic and think that maybe they're looking for someone that will maybe prioritize something like reliability.
I would hope so.
Going forward, because I think they've learned that some of the changes start at the top. And I have to give a shout out to our boy Fred, because he has been making some changes. He has been making some changes, and we are seeing the fruits of them. I think we are. It's not done yet, obviously, but I think that we're seeing the fruits.
It's not. But yes, to answer the question more directly, Alpine do need to address their reliability because, they're
short answer.
So
Chris,
many points.
Yes.
So many points are being left on the table. Like I actually had the urge to do this earlier, but I'm gonna actually do it now. I want to go do the math of like what percentage of available points have they gotten, like of those races where they don't DNF, where it's not their driver's fault. Like I want to go through and look at some like stats on Alpine, because it just they had 2 double DNFs that weren't their fault.
It's true.
Like, or at least weren't their driver's fault. And then the Alpine makes me sad. They could be doing so much better.
But she still loves them, people. Don't worry, she's loyal. Do you have any other questions?
Kira W is asking, do you think Ferrari didn't pit Leclerc for mediums because without pitting, he could hold up the Mercedes better for Carlos? I don't know if they had a set of mediums he could use.
They did not have a fresh set of mediums. I know they didn't have any fresh mediums. However, I asked myself the same question, why they didn't pit Charles. I can't help but wonder, because Charles was, I guess, screwed by the double stack earlier. Yeah. By the Mercedes coming in with a double stack. I wonder if Ferrari was like, we're not even going to play with that happening again, because they Merc double stacked. And so it could have potentially ended up being a situation where Charles was in a position that he couldn't even defend because he was behind them on scrubbed mediums. So I actually, in hindsight, feel like it was the right call. And it was sad that that happened to Charles early in the race. I felt bad for him because I felt like he had a really good position and could have really fought for a podium and maybe even for a 1-2. And it's really disappointing, but it's one of those things that, like, I mean, you can't, I know, like, Mercedes didn't do it on purpose. It just was what happened. It wasn't like what happened in Fernando's pit stop where that was just chaos. It was just
bad luck, bad timing.
Yeah, you couldn't help it. And Lewis was coming in. And if anything, they did Charles a favor by keeping him from getting any kind of a unsafe release penalty. So shout out to Ferrari for making some good calls.
See, I think that if they had pitted him, here's my alternate timeline and how I think it actually would have gone, because we saw that Leclerc was barely able to defend at that point against the Mercedes. Like, it was blink and you miss it type of a defense. In my mind, if they had pitted him, they put him on the mediums, he can at least distract Lewis or George from behind, depending on where he comes out amongst them. I'd have to go back and look at the specific timing of all of this because it is blurry. But, you know, defending from the back by distracting the driver that's trying to go and get at your teammate, that is also a strategy. That is also, at the end of the day, I don't think it would have changed Leclerc's result. I do think that he still would have ended up behind the 2 Mercedes, or the 1 Mercedes at the end of it, RIP. But, you know, it's a hindsight thing of, he probably would have had the same result, but which would have distracted the Mercedes the most?
And I have to give a shout out to, I feel like, all the teams this weekend, and particularly Ferrari and Mercedes, for having their drivers communicate well and be on the same page with inner team strategies. Because Lewis could have gotten whiny when George was ahead of him and they were chasing down Carlos and Lando, and could have been whiny and asked to switch positions and said, I'm faster or whatever. And Charles could have done the same thing when they were in 1-2 for the first half of the race. And I didn't hear any of that. And I was like, I'm shocked that I'm not hearing it, but also good for them that I'm not hearing it. So,
yeah. There's only so much wine and cheese I can take.
Tell me about it.
Anything
else, Buck?
You mentioned the first half of the race. I was keeping track. So the first legitimate overtakes that don't count, like starting, like the first lap, turn 1, turn 2, was on lap 7. There were only 2 overtakes, and it was both Red Bulls overtaking the car in front of them. The first non-Red Bull legitimate overtake was Hamilton on Leclerc when Leclerc made a mistake on lap 23. It wasn't really until pitting began that the race began, I felt. And
everyone was saving their tires for like a pit stop. That was literally, everyone was doing the exact same thing and just being like, it'll happen. We don't know who's going to make it happen. I bet you they all have bets in their own minds, or like officially, of who they think is going to bring out that safety car. Quite frankly, if I was a driver, I would do that.
Doesn't it?
And I would not make it a secret who I thought was going to crash.
Does it make a
I'm
case
also a bit of an agent of chaos
for like Pirelli trying to orchestrate 2-stop races all the time? Like, wouldn't that make it more exciting if, like, they always chose compounds that forced them into it made 2 stops?
They would need to make more tires, though, because we were already this week on the softest compounds. We were on C3s through
I noticed
C5s.
that, yeah.
So they would have to make a C6. They would have to push it even farther. Either that or not bring 3 compounds. Only bring, like, mediums and softs and just be like, sucks,
which
but
and they
no
have to
option
ask
there.
And they have to ask the sustainability question, because that's like their overarching goal. So at the end of the day, I think that that's kind of what makes a lot of that's kind of in the back of all their minds when making decisions. So
it's true.
Who can say?
Our Irish friend on Instagram is asking, do you think we'll see Carlos and Lando at the front next week in Japan, or Red Bull dominance back on top?
I think that Japan is kind of like the bag of I don't know, because it's like always raining in Japan. So it's going to be a question of who's going to handle it well and who's prepared for it. Because let's be real, the Red Bull was just not equipped for this track, but I do think that they're well equipped for Suzuka. So I do think we'll see some Red Bull strength return this weekend. But I definitely think that this was a really big confidence boost for McLaren and for Ferrari and even for Mercedes. And I mean, huge shout out to McLaren for their development this season. Talk about most improved. Oh my word. And also the person I feel like that everyone's overlooking that got completely shanked in Q1 was Oscar.
Didn't he also get slightly shanked on TV by Brundle?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. I was barely, my eyes were closed for that. And to the point where I was like fading in out of sleep. And I was like, did that happen in my dream or did that just happen in real life? He was in the middle. Did I fall asleep in the middle of his interview with Oscar and now he's talking to Esteban? I feel like he was talking, but what woke me up was Esteban, which I was like, not that we're hearkening back to last year when he was trying to talk to Esteban. No, for real though. He was in the middle of talking to Oscar, and Oscar the clapback king over here tweets after at Martin Brundle F1, shall we finish our interview next week at the next race?
So cheeky.
I died. I love him so much. So good. So good. So yes, we saw it happen. No, but I felt like Lance's crash in Q1, while it was super disappointing for Yuki, it was also super disappointing for Oscar because Oscar was like right
just around the corner,
like almost done with his lap, and then he didn't get to finish it because of Lance. So anyway,
well,
I have
and then
thoughts
as well,
on it, but I won't share.
Everything else was happening. So much was happening that no one got to see really any Oscar action anyway. So it was just like, oh, he started P17 and finished P7?
Like come on.
What? It's like he got as much attention as Bottas DNFing did.
LOL. So
like
good. I do feel like he got attention post race. Like everyone
oh, yes,
kind of talked to him
100%.
post race like, oh, by the way, good job, Oscar, you know?
Right?
But during the race, I mean, let's be real. There was so much happening during the race that was so amazing to watch and it was his like first race in Singapore. Like shout out to the Singapore rookies, Liam and Oscar, because wow. It was Logan's too, but we
don't need to talk about that.
You did it, Logan. You did it. You raced in Singapore.
Yeah.
Any more questions that we need to cover before we roll?
It seems to be a combination of stuff. I can't tell. Trying to track it down here. All right, so Aaron Machado wants to know, with Aston Martin and Honda working together and Red Bull joining with Ford, do you think Yuki will or could replace Fernando eventually? And John Wilshaw follows up with, can you imagine a scenario where Lance doesn't have a seat? Ultimately, yeah, combination of, do you
What's
think
happening at
some shuffling could happen there? I've heard some decent scenarios about how Lance could lose a seat or why Lawrence would allow for that.
I think Fernando would go kicking and screaming. I don't think Fernando would go quietly. I don't think he wants to stop racing, and with good reason. I don't think he's doing poorly, but the big question mark I think is Lance. And again, no one talks to us. No one tells us things. So we have no authority. I'll speak for myself. Maybe they talk to you guys. They don't talk to me. So I don't know anything, but I don't foresee Lance going anywhere so long as his dad is a large voice on the team. But I am happy to be wrong, and I'm not too prideful to say that I'm right. So it could be wrong.
See, I could see either scenario happening because Fernando is happy until he's not. And again, he's a good enough driver that he can have other options, especially next year where like a third of the grid have to either renew their contracts or look for a new one.
Valid point.
Fernando could go somewhere else. I don't think he'd fully retire. I think he's happy actually pushing, but he's proven that he still has mojo, which is what matters. Other teams would be willing to hire him. And with Lance, quite frankly, I do think that even a father's undying love and support has its limits. I do think that's a reality. It would be a conversation. And I think one day we will see Lance deciding of his own volition to go and do something else or race in another series. Like, that is how it will be framed. I doubt it would ever be framed as like, we are firing Lance, because I do think his father would, cushion the blow like that. But, I would also hardcore respect Lance a lot for pulling like a Colton Herta and being like, I'm going to go and be slightly independent from my family. Like, we are both interested in racing. We are both active parts of this industry, but we are not like codependent on each other. And I would respect the heck out of him for that. Also, wait, where did that thought go? No, it's gone. Never mind.
All right, so we have to wrap up, but before we go,
questions, everybody. Seriously,
yes.
Great questions.
Thank you so much, everybody who tuned in and had questions and joined us for the day. Before we go, predictions for who is starting on pole in Japan.
Max
Verstappen. Da, 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 da.
Max Verstappen.
Hey, we don't have rights to that song. Don't hum that.
I sang it. It doesn't count.
Okay, your top
make
threes.
It funny. It's a cover.
Your top three. Start,
like
in qualifying.
At the end of Q3?
Yeah.
To start the race?
He won
Max
2 and 3 in
Verstappen.
qualifying.
I think Max Checo Lando.
I'm going to go Max Carlos.
Ooh.
And I'm going to say Leclerc. The Ferraris are good at qualifying. I don't think they've
Especially
won,
Charles.
but
Charles
they're
can
fine
pull
at
a lap
qualifying.
out, man. Charles can just pull a lap out of nowhere. That's a
They
really
really
good point.
can. Yeah.
Good point.
All right. Well, I'm going to hold you guys to that. And
Yikes.
we'll check in next week after Japan and review that. But thanks again, everybody who showed up. We're now going to go record our podcast.
Woohoo!
Wait,
Thanks, guys.
I will say there's no rain forecasted currently for Saturday or Sunday.
Oh, what will Japan be without the rain? Whatever will we do?
Well,
We'll see.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, we will. Bye,
Thank you, everybody.
guys.